This is a weird one we're looking at today, folks. Katamari Damacy, released in 2004 for the PlayStation 2. I remember getting this game for my birthday 1 year later, having absolutely no idea what you do or what it was, and it was also one of the first games I personally received since my family and I moved to England. It was a new country and a new life we had to adapt to, changing schools was rough, and the British kids were picking on me for being American. But when I wasn't watching the new Doctor Who series on repeat, this was one of the games I could always come back to whenever I was feeling down. Still strange though.
For whatever reason, my siblings and I would always pronounce the title of this game Katamari Damacy despite missing an E, and we still call it that to this day. I have no clue why we couldn't properly read the name back then, but it looks like we're stuck for life pronouncing Damacy Demacy. Doesn't bother me anyway. Moving that aside, the sales goal for Katamari Damacy was around 500,000 units during its first year, but it ended up only selling 100,000 units, which sounds low, but apparently for a brand new intellectual property, that was seen as a success. Development began all the way back in 2001 by Namco, but they had a bit of trouble working around the software development kits included in the PS2, as they weren't updated at all and just left for game designers to figure out. Meanwhile, the Nintendo GameCube, which was recently announced at the time, was meant to be a lot more user-friendly to third-party companies, so yeah, they kinda got the short end of the stick there. Katamari Damacy also eventually got a remaster in 2018 for PCs and the Switch called Katamari Damacy Rerolled, which is what I'll be basing this review on. It's the same exact game, just higher quality graphics and the option of using motion controls with the Joy-Cons. If you still haven't played the game, this is the best version to get. The story for Katamari Damacy is a pretty simple one. The king of the cosmos, completely intoxicated, destroys all of the stars and the moon. Without even so much as an apology or even realizing the mistake he's created, he forces his son, the prince of the cosmos, to go to Earth with a magical ball known as a Katamari. Anything that's smaller than the Katamari will stick to it, and the more objects the Katamari gathers, the bigger it will grow, and in turn will be transformed into a constellation of stars. Keep in mind that the prince is only 5 centimeters tall, and yet he can still push this giant ball around. The king could probably sort this mess out in no time flat with his ability to speak in record scratches. But he instead orders his tiny son to do his bidding for him, despite taking longer. The king's an asshole, and I suppose the queen of the cosmos doesn't get a say in this? I guess not, because she's barely in this game. She doesn't even say a word. What a highly dysfunctional family. That's all story A anyway, but there's also a story B, where on Earth, the news keeps providing reports of the missing stars and gradually coming back. The only people we get to focus on, however, are this Japanese family, who are traveling all the way to a rocket launch site, where the father is one of the astronauts taken off, but the lack of stars or the moon could prove to be an issue. It has nothing to do with anything, but it's entertaining to watch anyway just for the bizarre animation. Though I'm extremely disappointed that Reroll doesn't include the English dubbing from the original PS2 version. It was amazingly awful, and it made these cutscenes all the more joyful.
It was called off. There's no launch today.
Oh no, after we came all this way to see your launch.
Well, the moon's disappeared.
Oh dear. It's baffling how this was seen as acceptable, but it is beyond entertaining.
Cancer came scuttling back. So yummy.
Ah.
Okay, let's skip the cancer talk for now. So what exactly do you do in Katamari Damacy? Well, as I explained in the story synopsis, your job as the prince is to roll the Katamari over many different objects in the level, some small and some ginormous. When you start the level, you can only stick small objects to your Katamari, but the more you pick up, the bigger the Katamari will be, and allowing you to stick bigger objects to create an even larger Katamari. In each stage, the king will set a goal to reach in terms of the Katamari's size and within a time limit, though some stages require you to only roll up very specific objects. If the Katamari's not big enough before the timer reaches 0, then you'll have to start the stage over again. Time limits start off pretty short, usually between 5 to 15 minutes with an easy size goal, but as the game goes on, you'll be tasked to create a ridiculously huge Katamari in only a slightly longer time. By endgame, you're asked to make a Katamari big enough to remake the moon in 30 minutes. That's how gargantuan we're talking here. Controlling the Katamari itself can take some getting used to. It's not like the left analog stick moves the Katamari while the right stick moves the camera. You have to move both sticks in certain ways to maneuver the Katamari, so pushing the sticks up moves you forward, pulling them down moves you backwards, and moving them in opposite directions rotates the prince. It's sort of like the sticks are meant to represent the prince's arms, and you have to visualize yourself actually pushing and pulling the Katamari. It's a bit of an oddball for sure, not to mention rapidly moving the sticks back and forth vertically makes the prince dash, though I don't remember it feeling feeling this stiff. And clicking the sticks puts him right behind the Katamari in case you need to make a 180-degree turn. As I said, it may feel weird to newcomers, but it shouldn't scare you away from the game. You'll just have to make sure not to bump into too many walls or large objects, because every time you do, a few of the objects you have in the Katamari will fall out, making it a little smaller. Occasionally you'll find something that's barely small enough to catch, in which case it'll bounce away from you and you'll simply need to roll over it again. However, one of the few complaints I do have with the game is that it's possible to get yourself trapped in a tight space, which will make you lose a ton of the objects you acquired. You can pick them up again as long as you don't waste too much time, but it's still annoying and not under my control. Graphically, even with the HD remaster, it's a pretty simple looking game, very blocky and edgy, but I find it quite charming in a way. Something about its simplicity really makes it pop out, and the objects are easily distinguishable. The music is also catchy as hell. It's a mixture of J-pop, jazz, and swing. It's great stuff. Not something I'd put in my video game music playlist, but I can sing along to it whenever it's playing. The exception to this being the main theme, which will never leave my head. Every time it comes on, an earworm is planted. It's such a basic tune, and the lyrics mostly consist of nas and laws, but damn it, you'll remember it when you hear it, especially with the weird-ass imagery during the intro.
Good luck trying to forget that song now. You're welcome.
The music may be upbeat and toe-tapping, but there's a pretty disturbing feeling to what you're doing as well. You only have a small Katamari to begin with, sticking very minor things to it like tacks and erasers, but you'll eventually start sticking living beings to the Katamari, such as mice, and soon after you'll get to roll up humans as they try to run away from you. The cops even try to shoot you before they meet their demise, and then once the mission's over, they all get turned into stars, never setting foot in their home planet again. This can be a very dark game if you look at it too deeply, but I love every minute of it. The best part of the game is the last level when you're rebuilding the moon, because the Katamari gets so utterly humongous that you can roll into damn near anything, wiping out entire towns and other establishments. It's sadistic and cruel, particularly with all the screaming humans and animals, but it's incredibly gratifying and strangely therapeutic for me. I may need help. Katamari Damacy is not a very long game. You can clear every stage in about 5 to 6 hours, but you can always search for presents in some of the levels that contain bits of clothing and accessories for the prince to wear. It's not much, but something else to do if you felt like you could have done with more game to play. Multiplayer is also available though, where you can either play as the prince or one of his 23 cousins. Jesus Christ, birthdays must be a nightmare. Again, it's nothing too spectacular. You're just trying to make your Katamari bigger than your opponents in the span of a few minutes, but it's a good way to pass the time. Bit of a short review overall, but that pretty much sums up Katamari Damacy as a whole, short and sweet. It may not be a large game, but it does all it really needs to. It's a game where you can quickly jump in, do a couple of missions, and then come back to it later. The strangeness alone is probably a good enough selling point too. And yeah, this game is very weird, and highly debatable whether it's simply being weird for the sake of just being weird. However, I enjoy the game's upbeat yet simultaneously dark tone, and sticking things together to make the largest Katamari possible can be pretty fulfilling. I'm glad this has remained a childhood classic of mine, though believe it or not, I've never actually played the sequels. Maybe if they come onto the Switch too, I'll definitely consider it, but I'm in no rush right now. It's fairly cheap and you'll get enough gameplay for what you pay for, so I'd highly recommend picking it up and showing some love.
Pretty easy game to talk about this time. I've been meaning to go over it for a long while, and I've had that footage on my hard drive for over a year. Nevertheless, it was a pleasure playing it again, and I'll look forward to eventually doing the other ones. Well, we still have some time left before the Resident Evil 3 remake and Persona 5 Royal come out, so we better head back to the Persona spin-off marathon. And now we're entering much larger territory, an RPG spin-off starring both the Persona 3 and Persona 4 cast in Persona Q Shadow of the Labyrinth. Thank you all for watching, you all have a good day, and hope you're all dealing with this COVID-19 business well enough. Take care.